Welcome to the Beau Show. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Joe Biden back together again. This is a line from the famous nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty, who had a great fall, as you may remember. Well, we've seen a number of bumbles and stumbles from this president. And I want to have fun with this show today, because it's been a relatively slow news week outside of horrific Hurricane Ian and its devastation in my home state of Florida. So I want to provide a little bit of levity in dire times. We need it. A humorless society is a dead society. And while you may think, well, why make fun of the president? I mean, I don't have to make fun of him. He does it quite well himself. The difference is that the mainstream media will overlook it. They give the president of the United States a pass when it comes to mental gaffes. And that's a problem, because if you thought that your president might be impaired, well, you would wonder about his decision-making abilities and judgment, wouldn't you? Why do NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, PBS, NPR, Bloomberg, and others not seem to care? Do you remember how much they harped on Donald Trump when they thought he overfed the koi fish in Japan, even though he actually didn't? Do you remember when they ridiculed him for saying we should maybe use bleach for COVID? You never heard the end of it. But with this president, who has had more blunders than can be counted, they just overlook it. They don't even report it. Let's take this latest one as an example. Here Biden is trying to commemorate a bipartisan bill signing about food insecurity that was in part proposed by Representative Jackie Walorski.
Saying that the president planned to welcome the family of the late Indiana Representative Jackie Walorski to the White House, but the president instead said this.
And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
Representative Jackie Walorski died in a car crash in northern Indiana last month.
Now here's the problem. Jackie Walorski died in a car crash last month. He is welcoming her family in just a few days. And Biden looks to the audience to see where she is, to be recognized. That is inexcusable. You can't afford to make a mistake of that caliber. Now watch how one of the king's men, Karine Jean-Pierre, tried to cover for Biden.
I'm sorry to have to do this, but I'm compelled to ask you to go one more time back to the question about Congresswoman Walorski.
I'm not sure why. Why one more time?
Frankly, honestly, I think the memory of the Congresswoman and history requires some clarity here. Can you explain where the mistake was made? Was the president confused? Was something written in the teleprompter that he didn't recognize? Can you just help us understand what happened?
I mean, you're jumping to a lot of conclusions. No, but you're.
Find out what happened here.
No, I hear you, Stephen. I'm answering the question. That you're jumping to a lot of conclusions. I just answered the question. If that had been the case, I would have stated that, right? I would clearly have stated what you just laid out. What I had said is that she was on top of mind, and that he is going to see her family in just 2 days' time on Friday to honor her work, to honor her legacy, if you will. I've just mentioned this. It's going to be a renaming of a VA clinic in Indiana in her name, and you know that is what he was thinking of. He was thinking about her. As he was naming out and calling out the congressional champions on this issue, on this really critical issue that's going to help millions of Americans, and that is what the president was focused on.
Would you be prepared to release the prepared remarks that the president had in teleprompter, just so we can understand?
I'm not understanding why that would be necessary. We always share the remarks that the president had, even delivered. That's probably going to be up on the website. Not really sure what that has to do with anything. I just answered the question about her being on top of mind. I don't think that's unusual. I feel like many of us have gone through that particular time where someone is on top of mind, and you call them out. Your legislation.
Lastly, I just wanted to return to this question of the Congresswoman, and I think we all totally get why she's top of mind. You've made that case pretty effectively.
Thank
but I think
you.
the confusing part is why, if she and the family is top of mind, does the president think that she's living and in the room?
I don't find that confusing. I mean, I think many people can speak to sometimes when you have someone top of mind, they're a top of mind, exactly that. And it is also, if you put it into the context, it's not like it happened outside of context, right? It happened at an event where we were calling out the champions, congressional champions in particular, of this issue, this important issue when it comes to food insecurity, something that this administration has led on from the beginning of this administration, not just across the country, but also globally. You heard him talk about food insecurity last week at the UN and the investments that we have put forward as the United States of America in helping deal with that. Look, he was at an event, you all saw, you all watched, which is why you're asking the question, right, where he was calling out, again, congressional leaders, a bipartisan leadership that we have seen on this particular issue. And again, he's going to see her family in just 2 days. And she was on top of mind. I mean, that is not an unusual scenario there.
Karine, I have John Lennon top of mind just about every day, but I'm not looking around for him anywhere.
When you sign a bill for John Lennon as president, then we can have this conversation. Okay, go ahead.
I'm almost dizzy from the amount of spin she just used. But I love what that last reporter said. I have John Lennon top of mind just about every day, but I'm not looking around for him. That was bold, and I loved it. Kudos for calling her BS out. Finally, someone who will stand up to this nonsense. And honestly, this is perhaps the worst cover by a press secretary that I've ever seen. She was hopelessly inept and unprepared, and it showed her lack of command. Imagine if more journalists actually held her and Biden to account. Imagine if the late night shows were as clever or as fair as the Babylon Bee is. Imagine if they could do a Hunter Biden skit. But alas, I digress. I'm dreaming. I'm one of the only ones who will do it. Now let's go to another recent blunder. When talking about natural disasters and the devastation of Hurricane Ian, Biden is alerting people about how to prepare for these storms.
Let me be clear. If you're in a state where hurricanes often strike, like Florida or the Gulf Coast or into Texas, a vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now. Everything is more complicated if you're not vaccinated and a hurricane or a natural disaster hits.
Get your vaccination? Are you kidding? Now, I don't know if this was a setup by his staff to make sure that they were paying the piper, so to speak, by getting Pfizer and Moderna their fair shout out, or if Biden got hurricane season mixed up with flu or COVID season, is hard to say. But either way, this can't be right. Although where I am in the Miami area was spared from most of Ian's wrath, I did manage to go check out the beach to see just how windy it was. And I did a special report there, which I want to show you. Hey there, this is Beau Davidson reporting to you live from Fort Lauderdale Beach. And as you can see, we're in the middle of Hurricane Ian right now in the outer bands, some kind of tornadic conditions out there, rough seas, red flags. And I just wanted to remind people out there that the best thing to do when preparing for a hurricane of this magnitude is to get your vaccination. Back to you. So just remember, folks, when tragedy strikes, make sure to get your vaccination. It helps when your car is floating and you're sitting on your roof. In his recent address to the United Nations, Biden said this about those lost in Afghanistan.
Last month, we lost 13 American heroes and almost 200 innocent Afghan civilians in a heinous terrorist attack at the Kabul airport.
Here's the problem. The 13 soldiers we lost perished last year in August 2021, not last month. Does he know the difference? Probably not. He's 2 for 2 on misrecognizing fallen Americans. And it's not just Biden himself that makes these gaffes. Let's go back to his spokesperson, who is supposed to be the lucid one, Karine Jean-Pierre. If Sarah Huckabee Sanders or Kayleigh McEnany wore this much eyeshadow, they would be calling them clowns or worse. But hands off. Jean-Pierre was talking about the Russian Nord Stream pipeline, which was recently attacked. Let's take a listen.
You've heard us say this, that what we see Russia's doing, and we've been very clear about this, is that they're using energy, they're weaponizing energy, and it's choosing to one of the things that has been out there, to shut down the pipeline of Nord Stream 1.
Now, are we talking about the Nord Stream pipeline or the Nordstrom pipeline? You know, the one where you can get shoes and dresses. So it's not just Humpty Joe Dumpty that makes these gaffes, it's his own staff. I think the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. It's like he drags down the collective intelligence of everyone around him. You know, Donald Trump was intentionally funny, but Biden is not. His humor comes at his expense. Like, take this story he told about a certain bad dude.
I learned a lot. And I learned that it makes a difference. This was the diving board area, and I was one of the guards, and there was a 3-meter board. And if you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did, and back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There's a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Come down here in the basement where mechanics, where all the pool filter is. You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, "You walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, 'You may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.'"
Did you follow any of that story? Corn Pop? It was so out of touch and the ramblings of an old man. Recall that with Trump, he would say things off the cuff that maybe are a bit uncouth, but he'd just say whatever he was thinking at the time, unfiltered. With Biden, you get these ramblings that either make no sense or are woefully inaccurate, like the deceased congresswoman, or when our soldiers in Afghanistan were killed by his botched withdrawal. This has to be of grave concern to the Democrat Party, who might wheel him out to run for re-election in 2024. Former Trump Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney made the point that, when the president is in the Oval Office, for instance, or maybe doing a press conference, his staff can kind of control things. But what is happening is that more and more, Biden is either going off script, or he's reading the script wrong, or just making things up that don't exist. This notion that Jean-Pierre kept referencing, top of mind, is nonsense. That Republican Congresswoman, Jackie Walorski, was not top of mind for him. He barely even knew who she was. I think things like, "When is dinner?" or "I need a nap," are more top of mind for Biden. Speaking of naps, you'll probably remember this one. That's usually what others are doing when he is speaking, such as his most recent address to the United Nations. And of course, it's not always talking that the president has trouble with. The teleprompter is also troublesome for Joe. He's like Ron Burgundy from Anchorman. He will read anything that is on it.
Because of the actions we've taken, things have begun to change. End of quote. In the past 3 weeks.
Biden also likes to whisper when he wants to make a point.
I got them $1.9 trillion relief so far.
Guess what? Employers can't find workers.
I said, yeah. Pay them more. Pay them more. Pay them more.
And that's wild because usually he's yelling.
So when they come to you and talk about big spenders, let them know. I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
And once again, Joe has a tendency to say things that he's not thought through before saying them.
We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
And if we are talking top of mind, as Karine Jean-Pierre says, it's clear that Donald Trump occupies some serious real estate in Joe Biden's head.
Well, Trump is pursuing a damaging and erratic trade war without any strategy, by the way.
This guy is moving to foment hate. But President Trump and the demagogues around the world, but if Donald Trump is reelected, he doesn't want to shed light. He wants to generate heat, and he's stoking violence in our cities.
And you may remember that Joe Biden delivered an entire primetime address recently in Philadelphia talking about the domestic extremism of Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans, even though one of his own supporters just killed an 18-year-old Republican kid in North Dakota. Joe Biden used to talk about how he had a stuttering problem growing up. And, a speech impediment is one thing. But if you go back in his 40-plus years of swampness, you will see a very lucid Joe Biden speaking on the Senate floor. What we are seeing now is not the product of a speech impediment. These are legitimate mental errors, probably from significant cognitive decline. I dare say that he could pass a cognitive exam, as Donald Trump volunteered to do. And you know what's interesting about that is that Trump's advisors told him, we don't recommend this because if you fail it, we can't hide it. And Trump told them, bring it on. I'm not worried. Joe Biden's team would never let him take a cognitive exam because if he did, they could not hide those results. But what does Joe Biden think of America? Well, once again, we have to take him in his own words. When nominating Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, Biden said this:
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word.
And people thought Kofefi was weird. He has called Kamala Harris a number of different things.
There's been a little change in the arrangement of who's on the stage because of the First Lady's husband contracting COVID. But look at this room and what you see. That's right. She's fine. It's me.
So he calls her the First Lady when she's the VP. By the way, these clips come from India Today, not from any mainstream American media outlet. They are too scared to do it. They are grifters. But he also called Kamala Harris this.
All kidding aside, of course, President Harris is a proud Howard alum. She might have something to say about Delaware State.
Okay, so now she's not the First Lady, but President Harris. Here's the deal. It's not the only time he said it.
Now, when President Harris and I took...
And again.
I took it to instill public confidence in the vaccine. President-elect Harris took hers today for the same reason.
That was right after Biden took office. So does Joe think that Kamala really is the president? I just showed you 3 times where he has said it and didn't even correct himself. That means he does not know what he has said or that he's incorrect. Someone who doesn't have that kind of self-awareness is not cognitively sound. Calling Kamala Harris the First Lady and the President 3 times is not just an occasional slip-up. But that's how Karine Jean-Pierre makes excuses for him, as if anyone could make that kind of mistake. And I want to make the point that when you search for these gaffes online, the media outlets that report them are outlets like The Sun, Sky News Australia, India Today, and Forbes, with Forbes being the only American media, it's the only American media there is reporting on this. Where are CBS, NBC, and ABC, and the rest of them on this? Do they just look the other way? And don't forget that First Lady Harris, Vice President Harris, President Harris, whatever it is, has a lot of word salad of her own. Here she is in Highland Park after a shooting.
We'll deal with what we need to deal with in terms of also as we move forward, all agreeing that we got to be smarter as a country in terms of who has access to what, and in particular assault weapons. And we got to take this stuff seriously as you are, because you have been forced to have to take it seriously.
She's no more lucid than Joe is. Kamala recently visited the demilitarized zone on the border of North and South Korea, but she has no idea what the United States southern border looks like because she's never been. And, you know, the others in the Biden cabinet, from Attorney General Merrick Garland to Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, have been painfully inept at their jobs, meaning Biden has picked people to run these agencies that don't know what they're doing. The border is a mess. Crossings are at a record high, 2 million people. What does Mayorkas have to say about that? When parents were targeted by the FBI and when asked about the increased likelihood of terror attacks after the Afghanistan withdrawal, Merrick Garland fumbles over his own words. So that's why when I make this analogy to Humpty Dumpty, I talk about all the king's horses and all the king's men. All of this supporting cast can't help Biden out at all because they too have failed at their respective duties. This isn't simply about forgetting a deceased congresswoman. It's not just calling your vice president the president. It's about an entire apparatus of incompetence. And I mean, come on, man. You know the thing, right?
That we hold these truths to be self-evident. Sounds corny. Not a joke. Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
A president who doesn't know the truths that we hold to be self-evident is not really a president. It's the shell of a president. And outside of the verbal or physical gaffes, let's not forget about his business gaffes, which, well, you might not even call gaffes. They were deliberate, covert business deals run through his son Hunter. We are talking doing business with Ukraine oil and gas companies that were corrupt. We are talking Chinese energy companies that have spies, that stole American technology, that benefited the Chinese military. This was using American foreign policy to the benefit of companies he was in business with. Why would we be more interested in Donald Trump's tax returns than Hunter Biden's laptop? Don't you want to know who the big guy is? What is interesting to me is that the media actually did its job when pressing Karine Jean-Pierre on the Biden gaffe about the deceased congresswoman. It's one of the few times that I've seen them really press her about anything. I wish they had that same pressure when it comes to Afghanistan or inflation, foreign policy, the economy, and whether he and his son did anything illegal in using Joe's status to work with foreign companies that are a national security threat. Those are far more important questions. The media wanting to get a printout of the president's notes is interesting because they want to know if maybe some staffer put the deceased congresswoman's name in his script or whether Biden just said it. Either way, someone is painfully unaware, and it's embarrassing. So many gaffes, so many mistakes, so many excuses, so many poor cover-ups. It doesn't really matter who goes in the game. Jen Psaki, Karine Jean-Pierre, Mayorkas, Garland, Harris, they all have faltered. No one seems to know what they're doing. Running this country is not top of mind for them. Making America inflate again is more likely top of mind. Since today's show has hopefully been a slightly more amusing one, I'm going to close it out by portraying Joe Biden with a really cool filter that I found, since I look nothing like the man. And remember, nothing about this skit is true, other than the facts. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
My fellow Americans, the climate is warming up. We have unprecedented amounts of carbon dioxide in the environment. The cows keep farting. People like Trump keep drinking Diet Cokes. When that can fizzes, it puts CO2 in the air. Polar bears have nowhere to go. When they get in the water, the hair turns even whiter, like mine does when I get in the pool. The kids want to touch it. Climate is an existential crisis. It causes bad hurricanes. Y'all probably remember that bad hurricane 70 years ago. I think its name was Corn Pop. It was one bad hurricane, one bad dude. But I want to tell you all, and let me be clear, the best way to protect yourself in a natural disaster or a hurricane is to get vaccinated now. The Delta Airlines strain is going to be bad this fall. Donald Trump and the MAGA variant are a threat to our democracy. A threat to our democracy. They don't accept the rule of law. They don't accept the 2,000 mules that I put out there. 2,000 mules for Sister Sarah is what we called it. President Harris knew about it. Excuse me. First Lady Harris. I want to thank everyone here today for helping us sign this important piece of legislation, the More Inflation Act. So many bipartisan folks helped us work on this. Worked hard, like Senator Strom Thurmond. Is Strom here? Oh, okay, he wanted to be here. But here's the deal, folks. I wrote the bill. I said, spend more money. Son of a gun. They did. I also want to acknowledge someone else here, someone very important. My son, Hunter. Smartest man I know. He's been tireless in defending hookers' rights. He's helped broker peace in the Ukraine. He's helped us share our technology with China. He's helped get safe crack pipes to homeless people everywhere. He's helped the Geek Squad at Best Buy be more diligent in the laptop repair. Thank you, Hunter. I also want to thank my wife, Jill. Her outreach to the Latino communities has been incredible and helped us create the first Taco Tuesday in American history. And let me be clear, we respect the taco community, the enchilada community, the fajita community, and the tamale community. We welcome you at our southern border. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all you know the thing. Oh, my staff is waving to me. Hey there. You all look so pretty. You look like you're 19 years old with those pretty barrettes in your hair. Well, they're saying I gotta go. So America, here's the deal. God bless Ajahn Fudnya.